This is the cool part about working on the roof is you get to see the awesome sunsets from up here and the cool view of the mountains.
Yeah.
So I just want to describe some of the recommended tools if you're going to try to do your own roof or re-roof your own house. I'd highly recommend that you buy a roofing nail gun. I just bought this inexpensive Harbor Freight nail gun. I bought the middle, not the cheapest one that Harbor Freight sells, but not the best one either. So Harbor Freight sells 3 different levels of quality of roofing nail guns. I got this Banks roofing nail gun. I honestly can't remember how much it was. I think it was, I don't know. I can't remember. It's like $150 or $200 or something. You get the 20% off coupons in the mail frequently from Harbor Freight. And this nail gun worked great for my purposes. You know, if I was a professional roofer, I'd maybe buy, a real nice name brand one, but this Banks one worked well and held up just fine and was effective for use on my entire roof. And I liked it just fine. And I installed the automatic trigger so that when you hold the trigger down and push it onto the roofing deck, it will automatically shoot a nail in. The other thing I'd recommend doing is buying a swivel air attachment. I bought this swivel air attachment, I think at Lowe's. They didn't have one at Home Depot when I went, but I went to Lowe's and bought this swivel air attachment for the bottom here, so it gives you a little bit more flexibility, and so your cord can go where it needs to go. Also, I got this air hose also at Harbor Freight. Get a good quality air hose. I had this one plus a longer one, and I had an air compressor down on my back deck with a big long air hose leading up to the roof. So you definitely want to have a good air compressor, a good roofing nail gun. It's worth the money. I could even probably sell this roofing nail gun for almost what I bought it for, maybe, $50 less or whatever, but I would still almost be renting one for very cheap. So it was worth saving the time to get that new roofing nail gun. Saved a lot of time, especially when I had friends helping me lay out the shingles for me. I could just go really fast nailing these in with the roofing nail gun. So well worth the money to buy a roofing nail gun. I was trying to be as budget savvy as possible. I was really trying to save money on this project, but it's still worth buying the nail gun even if you're trying to save money and do it. You also definitely want to have a good air compressor. I have this Makita. It's not a very big air compressor. It's just a 2 horsepower, 2.6 gallon Makita air compressor. You can see the model number there is MAC 700. Anyway, it's a great little Makita air compressor, and it's worked wonderfully. I mean, an air compressor is one of the most useful tools you'll ever buy. It opens up your whole world to a bunch of different air tools and inflating tires. Using it as a dusting tool when you have compressed air, you can blow off things when there's dust on it. An air compressor is just a very useful tool. And even if you don't want to spend the money on an air compressor so that you can use a nail gun on your roofing project, it's worth it because the air compressor you'll use for a lot of other projects if you'd like to do things around your house or even keeping things clean when you want to clean your car or clean the air filter in your car or clean the air filter in your house or clean the air filter in a vacuum. Air compressors are worth the investment in getting a high quality one, which is why I went with the name brand Makita air compressor that I've had for probably 10 years now. It's been a great air compressor. I have had to replace some of these parts on here. One time I had a leak coming out of one of these parts back here that I had to buy and replace, but it wasn't a huge deal. Anyway, air compressor is good idea, a good useful tool for a roofing project. A couple other tools I'd recommend is you're definitely going to need a good caulk gun. This is one that's just kind of destroyed. It got so covered in that black tar. I mean, and maybe even use an older caulk gun that you don't mind getting covered in tar, because when you're done, it's going to look like this. Because I use this one all over the roof, and it's just kind of messy, nasty black tar material that you have to use to caulk around the edges of where you're roofing. And so having a good caulk gun, and you're going to need more caulk than you think. I had to get quite a bit of the roofing sealant and adhesive because there's a few spots where you can't nail, and also at your final ridge cap you have to put a few dabs of caulk over the nails at the final nail that you do, and up along borders of places, and also when you make a cut in the valleys you have to glue that down, and so you end up using quite a bit of roof adhesive and caulking material, and it's black and really sticky like tar, so get a caulk gun that you don't mind getting all black, but you also want one that's going to work well because you're going to be using it a lot. So get a good caulk gun, but it's going to end up looking like this when you're done. And then you definitely want to get blades that are shaped like that. These blades are very helpful for, this is just the dispenser here, but these blades are very helpful for cutting shingles when you have blades, those little hook razor blades, and you're going to want a bunch of them, and get a high quality blade holder. I'll show you the one I have. It's upstairs. I'll go grab it. But another tool that I used a lot was these tin snips. Worked great for cutting the straight line down the valley, and they cut the shingles quite well. You could buy some even bigger, higher quality tin snips that would work, but I had these already, and like I said earlier, I was trying to save as much money as possible on this project and not buy more tools than I needed. And since I already had this pair of tin snips, I just tried using these, and they actually worked just fine. I ended up not having to buy a bigger, tin snip type tool. And I'd seen power snips that use like compressed air to make the valley cuts if you're doing a really big job. And I've actually used one before, the ones that you can use, the power snip things. But really for mine, I had several dormers. I made a lot of valley cuts, but even just using this simple tin snip worked just fine. And I didn't have to buy anything more. So that worked out well. Okay, talking about another tool that I think is helpful for roofing. Something else that's very helpful is getting a high quality just blade holder knife, one that you can use that is going to be strong, has a nice clip on the back here. This one was awesome. It's this Milwaukee was very good knife. I also bought some cheaper ones too, but at least buying one of these that I was using all the time with those hooked blades like I showed you before. So you want to use that good knife with some good hooked blades. They want to replace frequently because they're going to get dull fast after cutting through shingles. That was a worthwhile investment of about $10 to get a good knife to cut the shingles with. Another tool you want to consider having is you need to have a good measuring tape. This isn't a good one. This is a cheap Harbor Freight measuring tape, but it works. And you definitely want to have a measuring tape. You're going to be making lots of measurements. I had some metal yardsticks or metal rulers, basically a 3-foot long metal ruler, are very helpful. And sometimes even like a carpenter square or something like that is helpful too. So another tool that was super helpful, because making marks on black or dark colored shingles is difficult. You can't use like a black Sharpie marker. It wouldn't show up. You can't use traditional pencils because they wouldn't show up either. They're all black. So I took some white colored pencils or yellow colored pencils. I had a bunch of them. I had like 5 or 6 of them sharpened and up on the roof. So as I'd use it and then they would get dull, then I'd have another one. So I'd have like 5 or 6 of them up there. I borrowed them from my daughter's colored pencil set. I borrowed a bunch of yellow and white colored pencils that I could make marks with on shingles. So as I'm making cuts on shingles, I can draw a line where I needed to cut things, because some of the cuts you had to do are kind of complicated and tricky. And if you make a mistake on the cut, it gets expensive as you start to use up shingles. And so having colored pencils was really super helpful in making complicated cuts where I had to cut around obstacles or cut around, pipes that came up through the roof, or cut around the windows, dormers, and different places I had to make cuts. So having a good colored pencil was really helpful as well. Okay, another tool that I need to talk about is having a chalk line. Having a chalk line is super helpful when you're doing a roof, because it helps you keep your shingles straight. It also helps when you're making valley cuts, so you can make a straight line cut over a long distance. So using a good chalk line was very helpful. There's different kinds of chalk you can put in there, like ones that make a permanent line or ones that will make a line that will wash off. It depends where you're making the line or what type you use. And then also I had some less expensive blade holders that I, would lend people out, because I had neighbors and, my son and people come and help me on my roof. So I had a few other blades available for them, or one as a spare for me in case I dropped one. Because a few times, you got to be careful, but a few times I'd have a tool fall out of my pocket and slide down the roof and land on the ground, like clear down on the ground. And so having a backup blade in my pocket was very helpful, because I didn't have to go clear down and get this one until the end of the day. I'd go down and pick it up off the ground or, go find it. So having a backup blade is excellent and helpful. Having spare blades, having a chalk line. You definitely want a good high quality air hose. You want a roofing nail gun. It doesn't have to be super fancy. Just the Harbor Freight one worked really well. Just a good, if you have to make cuts, also having the tin snips is helpful. You definitely want a good caulk gun. All these things were helpful to have in doing the roof job. So another piece of equipment that I used to roof my house was rock climbing gear. I actually do a little bit of rock climbing as a hobby. And so I have rock climbing harnesses and rock climbing ropes. And so I was able to use that to stay safe when I was working on the edges near the border of my roof. And I have a ladder, of course, too, but there's some edges that got a little sketchy. Most of the roof I could do without having any kind of harness. And I did, a fair amount of it not even being roped in. But, you definitely want to be safe and be careful. I did rope in and use my rock climbing harness and rock climbing rope to stay safe on some of the edges of the roof, because there's some spots where I was hanging over the edge of the roof to get it in place and it was sketchy and would have been unsafe to do without the rock climbing equipment. I have a friend who's crazy and would do it without it, but I like to be safe and not fall off. It's not worth it. It's not worth saving some money if you fall and kill yourself or fall and get injured. So only work on your roof if you can do it safely. If otherwise, pay someone to do it. It's not worth dying or getting seriously injured. That your medical bills or your lost income to your family by you dying would be way more expensive than the money you'd save by doing your roof. So definitely be very careful doing it. I was able to safely use my rock climbing gear. I installed a ridge, a permanent ridge anchor system that nails into the joists with a lot of nails and screws, and it's really secure and safe, and I roped into it. And so now I have that permanent anchor system up on my roof now. Even though my roof is finished, I can get up there in the future, maybe hang Christmas lights or get up there to clean up the gutters, to get the leaves out of my gutters in the fall, using that rope-in system now that it's there installed underneath my ridge vent in one little spot where I can rope in where I needed it. So definitely be safe when you're doing your roof. And if you have rock climbing equipment or you're willing to buy a harness, they make harnesses and rope systems specifically for roofs. You can buy one of those and use that. Or you can buy some, if you already have rock climbing gear that you can use that. I was able to use that effectively. It did kind of get my rope dirty. The one rope that I used on the roof kind of got some black tar stuff on it in several spots and just kind of got dirty after being drug around the roof. Roofing is a dirty job. You get lots of fiberglass and tar on your clothes and on your shoes and on your knees and on your rope. If you use one on your gloves, my gloves would just turn black and get gross. And anyway, so that's one piece of advice. Just be safe. Maybe consider using rock climbing equipment, or also do it at a good time of year. I chose to do my roof in September when the weather in Utah is beautiful and not too hot, not too cold. It's just perfect, beautiful weather, for like a month. And it was a dry spell, so it wasn't raining for several weeks. So it wasn't slippery or unsafe. So choose to do it in good timing. Don't do it when it's so hot that you're going to, pass out from sweating so much that you're going to pass out from heat exhaustion. That also is a safety concern. You want to do it at a time when you're not going to be so hot or so cold that it's going to be unsafe. You don't want it to be cold and wet and slippery, and you also don't want it to be so hot that you're going to pass out from heat exhaustion. So choose carefully when you can. If you can choose when to do your roof, choose to do it in September like I did, if that's a good month where you live. But anyway, just a few ideas there.
Hey, look at this. It's over the cloud.
That's cool.
It's very nice to see everything, the mountains and the...
It is nice. Thanks for your help, Adrian.
No, you're welcome.